Support for Pop of Culture comes from Stallings Wealth Management. Daniel Stallings, financial advisor. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC. Member FINRA/SIPC, a broker/dealer, and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.
This week on Pop of Culture, we get into glass.
That material was also a way to create an homage that would last, because glass and metal is going to last longer than we will.
We shine a light on two different angles of the see-through substance. Also this hour, a family of bears. Or did we mishear that? And we'll ask our favorite question, what are you working on?
And I think it's such a misconception that nothing is happening in Anderson, because I assure you there is a lot.
That's coming up.
Support for Pop of Culture comes from Stallings Wealth Management, the Innovation Connector, and from you. With state and federal money eliminated, you are the difference in keeping local programming on the air at IPR. Become a member today at indianapublicradio.org.
From IPR, this is Pop of Culture. I'm Michelle Kinsey.
And I'm Kara DuQuette. Welcome to Season 3.
Yay! The Pop team is so excited to bring you more arts and culture coverage from where we live. And we're going to start today with two stories on glass.
There's a new documentary about the community around ball jar collecting. And yes, it's a thing. And there's an annual convention right here in Muncie.
Joining us to talk about all things ball jars in the Pop of Culture studio is Chris Flook. He's the senior lecturer of media at Ball State. Chris, thank you for coming into the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So a big documentary is going to premiere in January. Tell us a little bit about the idea behind it, how it came to be. Ball jars, in case you didn't know, if you're listening and you didn't know that ball jars are very, very important in this part of the world.
That's right.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start there with the importance of ball jars.
It all begins in 1886. No, just sorry. A man and a couple by the name of Mary and Jeff Harper. Jeff has passed, but Jeff was the great-grandson of Frank Ball, who was one of the 5 Ball brothers that founded the Ball Corporation, or what became Ball Corporation. And, you know, they made ball jars for many, many, many years inside Muncie. So Jeff, because of his family connection, collected probably the best ball jar collection ever. And you might think that this is like, you know, okay, ball jars, but like this is like tens of thousands of dollars. Like this is a very elegant collection, rare finds, demanded by lots of collectors all over the world. Well, the Harpers, after Jeff passed, both Jeff and Mary were from Muncie. Mm-hmm. And when Jeff passed, Mary donated that collection to Ball State University. Ooh. So we have that collection. It's not on display yet, but it's going to come at some point. But Muncie is also the location of the annual Midwest Antique Fruit Jar and Bottle Club.
Wow.
It's a regional organization.
It makes sense.
Makes total sense. But they have an annual conference in every January. And so last year, this announcement was made at that conference. Jeff and Mary were very much involved with the conference when Jeff was around. Jeff Harper is a legend amongst the conference goers because he had this really great collection. Yeah. And so what we did, through my role in the Department of Media, partnered with the Virginia Ball Center over at the Honors College, and we made a documentary sort of that collection and then of the club, their annual conference, and then just sort of an exploration of the importance of collecting things, the importance of ball jars, and then the documentary then ties all that into like Muncie's history.
Wow. How many ball jars are we talking about in this collection?
Thousands of ball jars, these rare one-off things. I mean, you think about it, the company had been producing jars from the early 1880s. Yeah. And the Ball Corp doesn't make jars today, but that brand is still licensed to like others, and so you can still get ball jars. But like, you think of maybe a classic. There's like 1 or 2 types of smallmouth, largemouth. Yeah. But there's I'd learned all this over the past year. There's just all kinds of variation. It is, and especially the rare stuff that is really sought after by collectors.
Wow. I'm assuming this would be your first ball jar conference that you attended in January.
It was, yes.
Tell me what that was like when you walked in and you started documenting this.
So I don't collect anything. And so like, it's not that I passed it off, but like I don't collect anything. So I don't really have it's like one person's collection is, in my mind, the equivalent to another. So ball jars. Okay, that's fine. I underestimated the elegance of some of these jars and then the cost of some of these jars. I mean, these people are trading jars that are $60,000, $10,000, $8,000. Yes. And there's a demand for it. The conference is really cool. It'll happen this year on Saturday, January 17th. It's open to the public at the convention center. People who trade this stuff set out a little booth and can come around and see it. But what's really cool is the days leading up to that, a lot of the heavy hitters within the club, they go into the hotel downtown and they have this thing called room swap. And they open up their rooms, they put all their best in like private collection, and then people just, usually with beers and good cheer, will go to each other's rooms and
wait a minute. They're
and
actual hotel rooms.
Yeah.
They just open the door to their hotel rooms.
Yeah.
They have a little display of their best ball jars. And they're inviting people in to make some deals.
To make some deals, room swap. And it's like a lot of the ringleaders. So it's like people that make...
We're talking about high-end
We're talking
jars
about very
and
high-end
rare.
stuff.
Yeah.
But it is delightful. It is, people are kind and they're joking. They know each other. Politics doesn't enter into it. I mean, 'cause everything else is very divisive right now in our culture. It's refreshing to be part of something or to witness something. I know they all have their political opinions and religious opinions and all that.
Yeah.
But the focus is just on having a fun time trading ball jars and selling ball jars.
I'm curious about the reasons why people collect and trade and come to a conference like this. Did you get some stories from people about where this began for them, why they collect ball jars?
Sometimes I think it's maybe idiosyncratic, like you kind of like something, or maybe a lot of people talked about having ball a lot in their families growing up, canning and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Nostalgia.
Nostalgia for it, right. But I got the sense, and you'll see this if you watch the documentary, that the people are just there to hang out with their friends. You could swap ball jars with Mountain Dew cans or pencils or anything anybody else collects. And it's more of just the medium for them all to get together and have a good time. It's about the community of it, And they some of them don't really see each other than that one time a year. But then it's they've done it every year for 20 years or 30 years. So they have this long connection in history. And then with the advent of, the past 20 years with the growth of social media and all that, they can do a lot of trading and communication throughout the year from, they're coming from all over. A lot of them do come from the Midwest, but there's people that come from California and Maine. So they can have these discussions about what they're into and what they're trading in July, and then sort of gear up for the conference in every January.
Wow. So that's a big part of the documentary, right? As you said. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned that you're not going to be able to get out of your head now that you know about ball jars?
Well, and it's I didn't realize just the manufacturing process. And all these folks, they know weird, nuanced stuff from the 1930s, what certain molds and models and I didn't realize that ball jars, at least the old mechanism, was the molds were all carved backwards. And so there was a couple molds within the Harper collection that we were able to see. And that makes sense. You pour in glass, you're drawing on this mold that's backwards and has to fill and all that. So there's tons of errors, misspellings, common stuff that you would expect someone in the 1890s or 1920s or whatever. They make a small error and they don't realize till a couple hundred or a couple thousand jars have been made and they got to redo the mold. And so that stuff that the corporation probably hated has now become the most valued
oh my gosh,
imperfections, which is just common with glass making, particularly in the early years. I learned about light. It's actually at least it was, I don't think it is anymore. It was very hard to make clear glass. And so they had to add all these chemicals, and so that some of the chemicals would fade in sunlight. And so the clear ones change color over time.
Oh, wow.
And it's just all kinds of little quirky things that the collectors have come to really value that might have just been passed off as being junk or mistakes when the jars were actually made.
Interesting. I know you don't collect, but do you now have a ball jar at home?
Well, I do a lot of canning. So I
You do?
I
So
have a
you
huge garden.
Use them. Yeah. Were there people at the conference and people that you talked to that still can with ball jars?
Some people, I would ask about canning
Yeah.
and they're like, we don't can. it's like, oh, okay. But then some people are like very much do
Yes,
can.
yeah.
A lot of people though, I would say almost everybody had some kind of story about canning that even if they didn't necessarily do it themselves, that they had a grandmother or a parent or something like that growing up, that was part of their life.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the premiere. Give us the details on that.
Premiere is on Friday, January 16th, the day before the big conference.
Yeah.
The conference will be at the Convention Center here in Muncie. And then the debut for the screening will be at Cornerstone.
Do people need to get tickets in advance?
Nope.
Do you just show up?
I mean, like we're hoping for a big crowd, but that is, the theater can hold a lot. It's at 6 p.m. Try to come early. There'll be a small reception afterwards. And then we strongly encourage people, if you can't make it, to go to try to go Saturday to the actual conference. You can walk through. You can see all these really cool things that people will collect. And then the documentary will eventually be on Ball State PBS sometime in spring.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming into the Pop of Culture studios to tell us about all things ball jars and the big documentary coming out in just a few days.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Chris Flook is a senior lecturer of media at Ball State University. We're rolling from glass ball jars to little glass beads.
Metal and glass artist Jessica Calderwood is in the Pop of Culture studios to talk about a new exhibit at Minnetrista Museum and Gardens called Threads of Home. Jessica, welcome to the Pop Studios.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this is a very interesting exhibit. I don't think I've seen or heard of anything quite like this before, Jessica. So let's start at the beginning. If you were to give someone kind of a nutshell of what is Threads of Home, what would your answer be?
So this project actually has its roots in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. So if you remember when we were all in lockdown.
Yes.
And looking for things to do to use up our time, I was kind of contending with whatever art supplies I happened to have at the moment that didn't require shipping.
Yeah.
And I had all these beads and like glass seed beads, those tiny little things.
Yeah.
And metal and enamel, which is like a powdered glass, which is my medium of choice. And I started actually thinking, well, what could I do that could suck up the most amount of time? And so I started recreating patterns that I found in my home using the seed beads, kind of like a little point or a little dot, and just tweezing these really elaborate patterns. And I found that the most interesting patterns were from textiles. So I was looking at my carpet.
Interesting.
My family blanket, right, the chair that my cat loves to scratch.
Yeah.
and sure enough, it did suck up a lot of time. But as the world opened up, I started thinking about how I could like kind of move outwards with this process that I got really enamored with. So I really loved the labor of it, and I loved the color, and I didn't mention this, but I actually melt the beads. So they kind of change in these interesting ways. They look distressed. And so I was at a friend's house and I was looking at their collection of carpets they had just brought back from their home country of Yemen, actually.
Yeah.
And I found that I was just as interested in the patterns, but also their stories.
I love that. And I think therein lies the uniqueness of this particular exhibit, Jessica, is the stories that are told about whether it's it's an item of clothing that means so much and has been passed down, or it's handmade, or curtains crafted from something else. And then you take that pattern and recreate it
in glass
Yes.
on metal.
Exactly.
Correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. But the stories that you tell alongside that, you had each of the individuals that you spoke to kind of tell the story, the meaning behind
Right.
that particular textile.
Exactly. So it kind of birthed this project titled Threads of Home that was really focusing on people who are first-generation immigrants to Delaware County. And I thought the textiles were important because it's an item that you can travel with.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's lightweight. You can fold it. You can put it in a suitcase. And it was an item that I found that a lot of people had decided to bring with them as sort of like a memory of their home, their original home. So it was 24 participants. And this happened over the course of about 2.5 years.
Wow.
And it was a huge process. And it was something that I didn't actually have a really strong vision of it. It sort of unfolded, as we were going.
Yeah.
But I would reach out to a person and I would ask them to come to my studio first and to learn about my work and the process and why this was important to me. And so for me, I thought that recreating that with that material was also just a way to create an homage that would last, because glass and metal is going to last longer than we will.
Absolutely. Especially those, the textiles themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
The textiles will degrade, they'll break down, they'll fade. And so they would come to my studio, and then, not everybody was really, always on board with the project for all sorts of different reasons, but most people were, and really interested. And so then they would go back to their home and pick something that was meaningful for them. And then they would loan that textile to me. I would document it. I would work on my part with the glass beads and the metal. And then we would do a photographic documentation of that person in their preferred space.
Yes.
With the textile.
Yes.
They could choose. Sometimes it was their home, but sometimes it was a park, right? But the parameters were really, somewhere in Delaware County, right? To kind of talk about the past and the present, where people were coming from and where they are now and what does that look like. So that's really the arc of the project. And so the exhibition that you see at Minnetrista, which is up until March 1st, it shows a large wall installation of all the, beaded enamel works, kind of showing sort of almost like a patchwork quilt of objects.
Yeah.
And then each person has a panel that has their photograph and then their information and some, narrative about why this piece was meaningful for them. And so the hope is that, that it's also educational for the people that come to the exhibit, as well as honoring the participants.
Absolutely. You had some help telling the visual story of the storytellers in the exhibit. Who took the photos that are displayed in the exhibit?
So I had a bunch of amazing collaborators for this project, and Mark Sawry, who is a good friend of mine and also a recently retired faculty member from the School of Art at Ball State University, and he was essentially along for the entire ride.
Wow.
And so when we would set up a photo shoot, I would be his assistant and I would, hold all the reflectors and help carry the gear. But his ability to kind of see space and context, composition, and sometimes humor in the photographs was it really just was the icing on the cake, the cherry on top.
Awesome. And can you describe for me the finished kind of the textile art piece that you created? It's round, and I guess at first glance I would describe it almost as a button.
Yeah.
Like a large button.
Yeah, some people have called them little pillows or little tuffets.
Yes.
So they're these round domed forms. Yes. And so I actually made these at a local metal forming company called Muncie Metal Spinning. And so we started working together also right after the COVID pandemic sort of opened up the world again. And so they're meant to kind of look like, little pillows.
Yeah.
that are meant to be kind of like welcoming and comfortable. And glass is usually thought of as like really shiny, right? And reflective. And so we do some things like these, acid washes to make the surfaces really matte. So they look really like the whole idea was for it to look like a trick of the eye.
Yes.
That it would look like
really
textile.
more like cloth. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. So when you talk about these threads from home, these textiles that they brought them with them to Muncie, what are the different types of homes? What are we talking about? Where are your participants coming from?
From all over the map. And obviously this is not meant to be like an accurate representation of everybody who has relocated to our county.
Sure.
It's more of a sampling that's meant to be symbolic, but let's see. So we have participants, I already mentioned Yemen. We have Palestine. We have France, England, China, Malaysia, Canada, it's 24, Bosnia as well, right? Yeah. So the list goes on and on, but my goal was to get as a diverse range, of participants as possible, right? Yeah.
What was the textile that maybe surprised you the most when they brought it to you, that you thought, oh, this is interesting, and then the story behind it?
I would say that's a great question. There are so many beautiful textiles, but I think that a lot of the pieces that were the most powerful for me were surprisingly maybe not the ones that were as colorful or dynamic visually, but really did tell a powerful story. So one of the participants, named Remzia, is originally from Bosnia. Okay. And so she immigrated to the U.S., and not in a direct line, but ended up landing in Muncie eventually. But her object was a very small crocheted pin, a little white flower with a green center. And it's a pin that she is widely available in her hometown of Srebrenica that really talks about the genocide that happened during the Bosnian War. And she lost all of the men in her family, her father, her uncles, right? Everybody was lost. And so this pin was a really powerful reminder that she wears every year during Ramadan to really commemorate that event. So I learned so much through this project, right? And a lot of it, tells stories of people who are coming to the U.S. for all sorts of reasons, right? Sometimes it's to escape war. Right. It's for economic opportunity. It's to be in touch with family. And this exhibition really kind of tells that entire story.
How did that feel as an artist to take all of these stories, which sound incredibly personal and powerful, take those in and then interpret them in glass and metal?
I felt very honored to do this project. I'm not somebody who has immigrated to the U.S., but I felt like I wanted to really be a communicator and a connector to be able to communicate these stories. And so I just felt really humbled by the experience. I loved the community aspect of this project. And I just, the amount of trust that people put in me for this, I was really, really humbled by.
Yeah. What do you hope visitors to the exhibit get out of the experience?
So many things, I hope, but I hope that they are able to appreciate the art for what it is, the objects, and sort of an education about, different ways of making. I hope that they learn a little bit more about our global community, right? And I do think that right now, there's a lot of rhetoric that's going around in terms of how people are thinking about our population, our immigrant population. And so there's sort of like a national amnesia about our collective history, that we are a nation of immigrants. And so I hope that through this exhibit, I hope that community members from all walks of life come away with an understanding of our shared humanity.
And I'm assuming when you started this project, you didn't realize the impact it would have in the current climate that we are in, right?
No, like I said, I started this so many years ago,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to, I just wanted to get into people's, like stories,
yeah.
right, and have a connection.
Yes.
And it took on a much more powerful meaning as the years have progressed, sadly. But so if it is very relevant. So, what our national moment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for telling these stories through your art. Jessica, thanks for coming into the Pop of Culture studios. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Threads of Home is open at Minnetristo Museum and Gardens through March 1st. You're listening to Pop of Culture. I'm Michelle Kinsey.
I'm Kara DuQuette.
And I'm Jen Blackmer. And today we have another entry in our series called Beautiful Things. This is our ongoing collaboration with Riverteeth Journal. Today we're very pleased to welcome author Diane Gottlieb. Hello, Diane.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we're so excited to have you here with us. And Diane is going to share her beautiful thing entitled Mondegreen.
Great. Thank you. Mondegreen. I found a lost memory today. Discovered it inside a writing prompt. Recall something you've misheard. The title of the 1971 Sly and the Family Stone song is It's a Family Affair, but I swore it was a family of bears. How wonderful it felt to belt out a song about bears and more bears, a family of bears. I imagine clumsy cubs gorging on berries, their proud papa watching as he scratched his back against a nearby tree. And the mama, a lovely, furry, solid mass of strength, safety, devotion. Oh, that glorious mama who lived to protect her young. I was young in 1971, clumsy. I gorged on chocolate and more chocolate, maybe berries too. Somehow, I hoped, though I didn't know it, that my soft, full rolls of flesh would save me. Somehow I knew, though I didn't know it, that my own mama, who took to bed midday, hibernating beneath worn woolen blankets, my dear mama, who wore sunglasses indoors to hide swollen eyes, disappear her tears, would disappoint me deeply. Leave me to the wolves. A family of bears. It's funny how the mind tells the ears what to hear, how the heart tells the voice what to sing.
Thank you, Diane, for sharing that with us. Mondegreen is such a lovely title for this. For our listeners who don't know, Mondegreen actually refers to a misheard lyric. It's a term for that. And that is, of course, the basis of this piece. What inspired the piece for you?
So I was in a writing group, and the facilitator would give us prompts. And the prompt that day was write about something you misheard. And this immediately came to mind, this memory.
Right. Yeah. The song is really, I mean, it's catchy and it's boppy, and I love it. After I read the piece, I said this morning, I listened to the song in the car, and it was very prevalent. Like, once you know you're listening for a family of bears, that's what you hear.
I love that.
And you say that at the end, and I think that's such a beautifully profound thought to end on, right? It's funny how the mind tells the ears what to hear and how the heart tells the voice what to sing. Could you dive into that maybe a little bit more? What is that for you?
So I don't know, that just came to me. But when I was young, I was very, very lonely. And singing just was one of the things that saved me. I later studied opera. I used to sing opera, but
wow.
as a kid, I would just belt out whatever.
Of course, yes.
And yeah, this song, I don't know, it was one of the ones that brought me joy, brought joy to a really, really round, chubby, bear-like little girl. So those two lines just kind of happened.
It's lovely though, this idea that the mind can determine how you hear a piece of art or a moment of connection between two people, right? And how your mind.
I think it's what I needed to hear.
Yeah,
I needed to hear about bears, and then I imagined the mama bear, and
of course,
it brought me comfort.
And as you get into some of the more difficult moments, I think this idea of the song maybe celebrating the family of bears is where we come back to. I also love the heart telling the voice what to sing, that there's such an emotional sense of our need to connect. And in this case, I think through song. So Diane, tell me a little bit about the second part of the piece. We talked about the family of bears sort of being a safe space. And then it seems as we move through the story that this was a bit of a painful time for your mother, yeah?
Yeah. So my mom did not have a family of bears either. Yeah, she actually grew up from 8 years old in an orphanage, and she had so much pain in her life, and so she was not able to necessarily give us all that we needed, but she's such a model to me of the beauty of imperfection, and a model of growth, because she never stopped growing. She died at 88 years old in a car accident. I think she would have gone on for I think she would have gone on forever. And you know, she was like on the internet. She was doing, like, before Zoom, she was doing Skypes, and she just learned and learned and grew with every year. And so she is really my hero.
That's wonderful to hear that, actually, and what you've done, I think, so well, Diane, is you've captured the tension between that pain, or perhaps this painful moment for your mother, kind of wrapped into this idea of the family, right? And tell me a little bit about Leave Me to the Wolves. What's behind that moment?
Oh, that is like, so my mom was really unavailable, so we were just on our own. And there are a lot of wolves out there.
There really
and
are,
baby
aren't there?
bears, yeah. Baby bears need some protection, even though they can be big and scary and on their own. But that wasn't there for us. Yeah, I have two sisters. I'll speak for myself. That wasn't there for me, the safety and the protection. So that's what the Leave Me to the Wolves was about.
But then it seems that your mother did, as you say, grow and learn as time went on.
She did, probably not soon enough to protect me from the wolves, but I learned and grew, and then as adults, we became very, very close, and it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Just
Great
like
way to bring that back around.
Yeah.
Diane Gottlieb is the editor of Manna Songs, Stories of Jewish Culture and Heritage, Grieving Hope, and Awakenings, Stories of Body and Consciousness. She is Special Projects Editor for ELJ Publications and is Prose and Creative Nonfiction Editor of Emerge Literary Journal.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure, and I just want to give a shout out to Jill Chrisman over at Beautiful Things and all the folks at River Teeth.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you to all.
We love our partnership and collaboration with them. And speaking of, this story comes from IPR's collaboration with River Teeth's Beautiful Things, a weekly magazine of micro essays. More at riverteethjournal.com. I'm Jen Blackmer.
This is the last part of our show, and every week we like to end by asking an East Central Indiana artist, what are you working on?
Maya Doss spoke to one artist busy with commissions just before the holidays.
Today on the show, I have writer, illustrator, and artist Olivia Willard from Anderson. Olivia, what are you working on?
I am working on holiday commissions. I do watercolor portraits of homes and dogs and cats, and I'm deep in that.
That is so sweet. What do you like about painting pet portraits for the holidays?
Oh my gosh. I'm obsessed with when people tell me the pet's name and their personality. And, like there was a cat that I did and that was really into potato chips and playing with Q-tips. And so I had to have those like all around on the ground.
So cute.
Yeah. And so things like that where the people really are sharing like their animal's personality, I love to sort of like channel it while I'm working on it.
That's so sweet. I love your watercolor work. In fact, I'm really interested in this book that you wrote, illustrated, and published yourself, a children's book of watercolor. Yes?
Yes.
So will you tell us, for the people who are curious about the process, what was it like the experience producing a book?
Yeah, it was a lot of sort of stumbling my way through the process. So mainly I'm a painter, and so I started with the illustrations. I was really interested in doing something more imaginative and creating little worlds. And I just sort of collaborated with my kids. My 10-year-old daughter was a really big help.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, she's the best. And yeah, the story just kind of came out of forming the illustrations.
That's really cool. And you said that it's of a historic site in Anderson?
Yeah. So in Anderson, our big historic area is on historic West 8th Street. And yeah, so it's all of these gorgeous like gas boom houses that are there. And there's a really cute historical park. And so it's set walking up that street.
So I'm curious, with that being the idea behind the book, who are the characters? What's the theme of the story?
Yeah, so the main character is Fable, which is a small child. They're really cool and creative. And the other characters are everyone that they meet along the way. So there's a snail community. So it's a mother-led community, and it's really amazing. And then there's a community of little people that live up in the trees that collect acorn caps. There are ones that live along mushrooms. They forage for mushrooms. And all of the plants and mushrooms and animals are all Indiana native. So that was really important to me.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think it's so cute that you were making it very magical and imaginative.
Thank you.
No problem. When it comes to your illustration style for your book, you said you started with the watercolors. Will you talk us through what the visuals are for those pieces?
Yes, I would love to. So I always start doing pencil drawings to sketch it out, sort of finding the shapes and finding the lines. So my illustrations, you can really find a lot of those lost and found lines. And then I translate that to my painting. So I have a lot of vivid colors. There's a section where Fable is meeting a little girl that is in the acorn community, and you can see inside the tree, and so the light is coming from within the tree. I really love wet on wet wash, just sort of getting to watch the paint dry and those really organic shapes that are found in that I really enjoy.
Yes, as a fellow watercolor artist, it almost looks like little rivers or something.
Totally.
I would love to know more about what made you choose to design the layout for the pieces the way you had, knowing maybe they would soon become a storybook.
Yeah, that was something that was a lot of trial and error. I started out with all of these individual paintings and then was wanting to really sort of piece them together, almost like a storyboard, but using those pieces. Mm-hmm. And some of them I did find that they were not super ideal to have in the book.
I see.
Yeah.
So what was like that trial and error process? Like what made a cut, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there were certain things where I took the painting, like the image, all the way to the end of the page. And when I didn't leave like room for a bleed area, I found that I was having to crop too much of my image out, that I wasn't happy. Or there were just, it was weird stuff with the margins. And so from that, I've learned for my next book that I really need to leave a lot of wash for a bleed area.
Yeah, that makes me think of Caillou. Funny enough.
Yeah, no.
How there's like the floating watercolor space.
Listen, I thought about Caillou.
Now that you've made a book to share with your students as a art teacher in Anderson, what is something you're looking forward to teaching them, or maybe a class you've taught before?
Yeah, I always love doing watercolor with kids. I find that it's one of the most forgiving forms of paint because you really are able to just give yourself to it. So it really allows curiosity and play. So that's what I really enjoy. I also do a lot of nature-inspired art through my nonprofit that I have. My nonprofit, Bloom Madison County, my best friend Anna and I started 3 years ago. And we have a lot of really cool programming. I'm really obsessed with our education program. We have a great partnership with Community Hospital in Anderson. And I teach mindfulness art classes. Farm to School is a huge program initiative that we're starting at my children's elementary school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we have 19 beds in. We got a grant for 100 fruit trees, and we're putting in a barn and a greenhouse.
Olivia, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's so special.
Yeah, we do a lot.
You said something about Bloom was a part of the farmers market too?
Yeah, we do the Anderson Farmers Market. So I run all of that behind the scenes. Let's see. We also do farm to table cooking classes. Those are really fun. We harvest right from the farm and then come inside and use those ingredients.
I love how much you've worked and put in effort into your community and making it a better place, not only just for like kids, but it sounds like it's like reaching even farther than that. You know, it's
totally
influencing the whole community. That's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Speaking of other people in the community beyond kids, we have an amazing group of seniors that have a growing club.
Cute.
And it's like 15 amazing women that are all like, I mean, they're like 65 and up, and they're working in the gardens, and they're like just gabbing. And we're working on a group art display right now. So that's really cool.
Oh, tell me more about this group art display.
Yeah. So we wanted to do some sort of a community mural, but with this group, it was just not really going to work, the labor piece of it. So
Right. You have to find a creative solution, right?
Right. So we have 3 wooden panels that we're working on a collaborative piece together. So we've been putting together images from the Children's Gardening Club and the Adult Gardening Club and talking about generational farmers, and it's really neat.
Wow. So when you're like gathering all of this inspiration from Anderson, what do you hope people realize about this maybe lesser known city that you've grown to love and invest so much of your time and effort into?
That Anderson is actually really cool. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of really exciting things. And I think it's such a misconception that nothing is happening in Anderson, because I assure you there is a lot.
That is something people say about smaller areas in the Midwest is, oh, there's nothing to do except look at corn.
Right?
Not true.
I know. I'm like, where are you at First Friday?
Did you even come to my farmer's market?
Right? Like, I know. People still will be like, Anderson has a farmer's market? And I'm like, oh my God.
If people wanted to see your book for themselves or wanted to find you, where could they look?
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's oliviawillard.com, or you can find me on Instagram at oliviaisstillpainting.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Olivia. Trekking through the ice and snow, right?
Right? Thank you for having me, Maya.
It's that time, Michelle. Woohoo! Woo! All right, we're going to find out what's going on. The Charles W. Brown Planetarium at Ball State will present a new show, The Great Solar System Adventure, Friday and Saturday, January 9th and 10th. This character-led adventure takes you through the dangers and wonders of our solar system and beyond. Fasten your seatbelts and see if you have the courage to make it home in one piece. Show times are 5 and 6:30 p.m. Friday and 6:30 p.m. Saturday.
Ooh, that sounds like fun. Checkpoint, interactive artworks and experimental play, an exhibition by John C. Gonzalez is on display now at the Ned and Gloria Greiner Art Gallery at Ball State. Gonzalez is an interdisciplinary artist whose practice spans installation, sculpture, painting, performance, writing, music, game design, and socially engaged projects. Wow. His work often blurs the lines between artist, viewer, and participant. This exhibition will include several interactive and game-adjacent artworks in the galleries, including images, performance, and site-specific works that will welcome viewer engagement and provide space for the unexpected connections and exchanges of its visitors. I love this idea. Gallery hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to that.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing. A tea and talk at Minnetrista Museum and Gardens is set for January 14th at 3 p.m. Enjoy tea and light refreshments while hearing from local glass artist Jennifer Halverson, whose work explores family heritage, memory, and the ways values are passed from one generation to the next. Jennifer will share insights into her recent body of work, including pieces featured in her upcoming solo exhibition in Lafayette, and discuss how glass can hold both personal narrative and emotional resonance. Register at minnetrista.net.
Very cool. Winston Churchill is back. Well, sort of. Pruitt Hall.
Do tell.
Pruitt Hall will host Randy Otto as Winston Churchill at 7:30 p.m. January 15th. The one-man show, a stirring, inspirational theatrical keynote, brings Winston Churchill's keen, incisive message of hope to the 21st century. The audience, get this, the audience will have the opportunity to interact directly with Prime Minister Churchill during Ask Winston, a fun, lively Q&A.
Okay, so what would you ask Winston?
That's right. Winston, what are your thoughts on AI?
Emmy award-winning comedian Vicki Lawrence was part of the legendary cast of The Carol Burnett Show, where she created Thelma Harper, better known as Mama. With new material and a modern twist, expect the unexpected from Vicki and Mama. AndersonParamount.org has the details.
Send your shows and other arts and culture happenings to us at indianapublicradio.org/contact, then click Pop of Culture.
Support for Pop of Culture comes from Stallings Wealth Management, the Innovation Connector, and from you. With state and federal money eliminated, you are the difference in keeping local programming on the air at IPR. Become a member today at indianapublicradio.org.
And that's our show. Our general manager is Phil Hoffman.
This week was produced by Luke Jones, who knows all good things come in threes.
And our audio fellow is Maya Doss. Our show was hosted by me, Kara DuQuette.
And me, Michelle Kinsey. Pop of Culture is a production from IPR on the campus of Ball State University.
That's okay. No, this is making me better. This week on Pop of Culture. Sorry, I scared myself.
What was good, though? I was right there with you. I was like, what's going to happen? Tell me more, Kara.